The top 10 quarterback units plus news and notes from across college football after the Stinger. Hello and welcome to Good Morning College Football, episode 47, and we are 94 days until the 2024 college football season kicks off in Dublin, Ireland. My name is Nicholas Ian Allen. I am here for CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. Thank you so much for joining us live if you are doing so. Whether or not you are, please do give us a like on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Subscribe there. Make sure that we are moving forward. We very much appreciate your support in doing that. And also, if you weren't aware, there's a contest ongoing from the contributors at Campus to Canton where we are soliciting or we're asking for those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts for your favorite Campus to Canton podcast in that C2C feed. The CFB Winning Edge podcast is back and will be in that feed soon with our first conference preview of the season. Scott Xavier and I took a deep dive into the MAC as our first conference preview. Of note, before we recorded, we weren't able to find any win totals for the MAC at any sports books. Possible, certainly missed something, but for official grading purposes, which we've done the last 3 years, we're going to have to go back and refer to those win totals that we posted or that we previewed when it's time for official grading purposes. So just keep that in mind, that we did go ahead and podcast and put out our projections prior to those official win totals being posted by somewhere like DraftKings, which we've used in years past, FanDuel, Circus Sports, we've referenced here on the show. We'll find some and we'll make sure that we're grading them. We also threw in a little bit of a different, a second set of win projections. Talked about it very briefly, but on our CFB Winning Edge podcast in our conference previews this year, we're going to give our traditional way of doing those preseason win totals, which we talked about here on Good Morning College Football last week, where we just go through and our regular projected point spreads for each game. We convert those to a projected winning percentage, add all those up, pieces of those wins. So if it's 94%, it's 0.94 wins. If it's 12%, 0.12 wins, add those all up, you get your win total. But in years past, we've had not real trouble because our overall success, our record is quite good. We've been 55% or better every year. We're over 60% over the last 3 years, all FBS teams since we've been doing this. So feel pretty good about that. But I think we do have some room for improvement on the extreme. So when you've got a team with a posted win total of 10.5, 11, something like that, we are basically always going to be under the way we do it. And if you have a win total posted of 2.5, 3, we're probably almost always going to be over. So I did want to, see what we can do. This is unofficial, but we are tracking it this year, where we give a little bit of an extra boost to teams that are favored in the vast majority of their games, give a little bit of a penalty to teams that are underdogs in the vast majority of their games. And so hopefully that'll help give us a little bit better chance of some, not just being a flat out over or under, on the extreme. So anyway, we'll dig into that more as we get a little bit closer to the season. But again, if you want to give some kind words to the CFB Winning Edge podcast on the Campus to Canton YouTube feed, we very much appreciate that. But there, of course, is a ton of great content from a wide range of shows that basically, you're on an almost daily rotation with content there, audio content. But our members at CampusToCanton.com, of course, have access to written content, the Discord, for as little as $2.99 per month. Get tons of great tools and information. Or you can take a look at everything we've got to offer If you're interested in becoming a C2C Winning Edge or All 22 tier member, that includes access to our returning production database, our team profiles, which is what we use a lot on this show, but gives you a chance to dig in individually, all those team pages, as much information as you can handle. And of course, if you do sign up, please make sure that you're requesting access to those Google Sheets. We try to get those sent out as quickly as possible. But we have had in the past some issues with email address and not necessarily lining up or working super great with Google Sheets. So make sure you reach out to us if you're not getting the access that you are supposed to, because we certainly want you to be able to use those sheets as much as possible. And we very, very much appreciate your support. Today, let's start off, as we usually do, with a little bit of transfer news. The biggest item from the last 24 hours or so is that Tyler Barron, the productive pass rusher at Tennessee, spent his spring at Louisville, committed to the Cards, is over a 100 rated player in our individual player ratings, just coming off a very, very disruptive season for the Vols. Barron had, just looking up the numbers here real quick, 41 pressures according to PFF, had 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. So all that equates to over, into the double digits as far as production points added to his individual player rating, the way that we calculate that. He is headed to Miami, where he's going to continue sort of this string of spring success in the transfer portal for the Hurricanes. Barron, who comes in at a video game rating of over 100, as I said, a 108 right now, according to our numbers. So, past the college football 25 99 club, the way that we do it. Made a couple of changes a few years back. So we don't stop at 99 anymore. We let guys like Tyler Barron add to it if possible. And adding to that Miami defense, that is probably going to have half a dozen first-year transfers playing significant snaps, if not more. Barron, not sure if he'll be a week 1 starter and joining the team in the summer, but as good and as productive as he is, I'm sure he's going to play quite a few snaps in that defensive line rotation. Miami now up to number 12 in our national power rankings after this news and a few other transfers in the last couple of weeks. Number 2 in the ACC in our team strength power ratings at CFB Winning Edge. A few other notes, names maybe not quite as well known, but Brandon Lane, formerly of Stephen F. Austin, had committed to Michigan State earlier in the spring. He is actually now planning to head to Louisville. So the Cards, even though they lost Barron, worked fairly quickly to add an experienced defensive lineman to the group. At Ohio, Torrey Cox Jr. left the team earlier this spring. We talked a lot about Ohio in our MAC preview podcast last night when we recorded. A team that just lost a ton of players to Big Ten teams specifically, and Torrey Cox being the most recent. He is committed to Illinois, a position of need for the Illini, as they look to get back to a bowl game in the new look Big Ten in 2024. Former Michigan wide receiver Eamon Demas also is headed the other way, committed to Ohio. And I bring that up. It's kind of interesting because, Dennis did not record a stat for the Wolverines in 2023. But if you remember just a couple of years ago at Ohio, there was a wide receiver by the name of Sam Wiglis, who was a standout on the scout team for Ohio State, was a walk-on, hadn't played very much for the Buckeyes, but transfers to Ohio, immediately becomes one of the best wide receivers in the MAC, all-MAC performer. So not saying Dennis is going to be that type of player, but the history is there to indicate that perhaps a player could take a big jump transferring from the Big Ten to Ohio. And Ohio, though they've added a few transfers in recent weeks, Ian Pugh from Illinois, Dennis, Isaiah Hardup from Southern Illinois committed on Tuesday also as well. And Coleman Owen, somebody who's listed on the roster from Northern Arizona, really the most experienced wide receiver on that Ohio roster that was just completely decimated by departure from the transfer portal and things like that. So plenty of opportunity for snaps and playing time in an offense that has had some success in Ohio, a 10-win team last year. If they're going to have any chance to get back up to that level, that wide receiver core is going to have to come together quite quickly because it, in my personal opinion, looks like the biggest question mark going into the season. Another wide receiver on the mix this time, or on the move, I should say, this time a former starter, Justin Robinson, who started for the Mississippi State Bulldogs last year. He is headed to West Virginia, another team that certainly needed some depth in that wide receiver room. So the Mountaineers looking to capitalize off of last season's kind of unexpected success, overachieved according to most preseason expectations, and should be highly competitive once again in the Big 12, which itself is likely to be very highly competitive. Seems like there's half a dozen or more teams who you could make a case are going to be contenders in the Big 12 this season. I think West Virginia certainly has a case. And one final note, and this missed our attention prior to recording that MAC podcast last night. We talked about how we expected Buffalo to have 4 returning starters on the offensive line, and that sort of seemed like the major area of strength of that offense. It still might be, but they have lost starting left tackle Isaiah Wright, a former Rutgers transfer. He is now committed to Maryland. So still some transfers ongoing, maybe not the biggest impact players overall. Do think Barron is going to have an impact at Miami. Others are, filling holes here and there, and some somewhat under the radar players. Torrey Cox, really, really solid corner the last few seasons at Ohio. I think he has a chance to start sooner rather than later at Illinois, but not necessarily the major impact offensive skill position players like we'll be talking about a little bit today with our quarterback ratings, our position and unit ratings. This is something that we offer in our team profiles. If you go into the document, into the sheets, the third tab is 2024 FBS positions quick reference, and that gets you all the data from each team page filtered in by position, by unit. That includes full roster data, includes offense, defense, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, skill positions all together. Offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, defensive back, front 7, back 7. It's all in there as far as average 247 rating, rivals rating, on-3 rating, our individual video game ratings, our overall individual ratings, the starters at each position, the 2 deep. So starters and that second group that we have listed on each team page. And then what we call our position strength ratings. What that does is try to give an overall rating for each individual category, which gives the starters the most, the highest weight, but then does try to factor in some depth. So, injuries when they do happen are going to be certainly impactful, but some teams are able to weather those a little bit better than others. And, so at quarterback, most of the rankings that we're going to talk about here, where our number 1 QB unit is Oregon. Some of that is depth because, of course, the Ducks added, in addition to Dillon Gabriel, who spent last season at Oklahoma, had great success, is another player over a 100 in our individual player ratings, just based in large part by the production that he's put up at UCF and Oklahoma prior to ending up at Oregon. But of course, Oregon has a 5-star transfer in Dante Moore, who saw 9 games of action as a true freshman at UCLA last season, was a starter very early in his career. And then Austin Novosad, who is projected to be the number 3 quarterback for the Ducks this season. He has had an incredibly strong spring and was a fairly highly rated recruit himself before signing with the Ducks. But Oregon comes in at number 1 in our quarterback ratings. And it's in part because Dillon Gabriel, like I said, over a 100 individual player rating. That starter carries the heaviest weight. And because there's only one starter in quarterbacks, for the most part, these unit rankings are going to line up fairly well with just who has the best starter. Not always, but that's sort of how it works at quarterbacks. In future shows, it'll get a little more based on the group as a whole. Running backs we'll talk about, of course, 1-2 punch and things like that, going to carry some weight. Wide receiver groups, depth is going to be a major factor there. Offensive line more so than any, because of course 5 players are factored into the starting lineup there. And then on defense, at least 3 players at each level. So it gives maybe a little clearer look at the depth. But as usual, we're going to start with quarterbacks, and Oregon comes in at number 1 in those position strength ratings. And that rating, just in case you're curious, is over 100. So 100.65 right now ranks number 1 in our position unit ratings. That's because Dillon Gabriel is at a 103, Dante Moore an 89.3, and Novosad an 81.6. Number 2 on our list is Ole Miss, and that's in part, again, because Jaxson Dart, multi-year starter, was a highly rated player coming out of high school, but has been productive both as a runner and as a passer. First at USC, where he showed some flashes, in the last couple of years at Ole Miss. Now a 28-game starter, a Heisman Trophy candidate, a riser in draft circles, it sounds like, in recent weeks. I've seen multiple things written. Bruce Feldman had a big piece that got some anonymous quotes from coaches and scouts and things like that. I know our Devy team is fairly high on Dart. He seems to be, again, kind of a riser in that group. Walker Howard, the former highly rated LSU signee, right now projected to be the top backup, but that position strength rating for the Rebels at a 98.9 puts them in at number 2, just ahead of Georgia, which of course is led by Carson Beck, who many expect to be the number 1 overall pick in next season's draft. Beck, Heisman co-favorite, I believe, last I saw, with Quinn Ewers. Somebody who we had to get not necessarily the most creative, because we have started to use on-threes rankings as one of the key pieces in our individual player rating calculations. And On3 has done a thing the last couple of years where they give an updated player rating for the highest rated player. So Beck was sort of under the radar a little bit, at least compared to a player like Jaxson Dart or Ewers. And so the level of production that he would need to really show that he's that expected to be number 1 top quarterback in the draft just hasn't quite been there yet. He's a 1-year starter, had a great year, of course, but needed that sort of boosted rating, augmented rating to get him up into that 100 individual player rating area. Is a 101 right now for us. And Carson Beck is, of course, the starter. Gunnar Stockton expected to be the number 2. Jaden Rashada recently joined this group as well, transfer from Arizona State, making headlines for other reasons. And then Ryan Puglisi. So this is a 4 quarterback room that rates as among the most just in terms of raw talent, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Georgia is about as good as it gets, and everybody behind Beck comes in with a high school recruiting rating a tier or more higher than that quarterback who's considered the favorite either to win the Heisman or be the number 1 draft pick or both in 2025. Number 4 on our list is Texas. Quinn Ewers leads that group. Of course, Arch Manning being the top backup there is very, very helpful. If Ewers were to go down, which he has at points in the last 2 seasons, Texas, you would expect, is going to be in pretty good hands with the redshirt freshman. Trey Owens, also a spring standout as a true freshman, factors in as well. But that Texas group, according to our team profiles, really just has those 3 as scholarship quarterbacks. So not quite as much depth as a team like Georgia, certainly not as experienced in terms of depth as a team like Oregon. But when it comes to raw talent, Texas is the top-rated team, which we'll discuss shortly. Florida State filling the shoes of Jordan Travis with DJ Uiagalelei, who, of course, was a 5-star coming out of high school, well-traveled now, but coming off a strong spring and with 40 career starts under his belt. No surprise that DJU is rated in the upper 90s in our individual player ratings. Brock Glenn got a little bit of experience last season. There's quite a bit of a drop-off if we just look at individual player rating, because Glenn's still just in the high 70s as a redshirt freshman. But probably you could say a little bit underrated based on some of the reports that we heard last fall, I should say, for Glenn, and the experience that he was able to gain. Didn't necessarily translate to big numbers, as you remember from his appearances last season, but still, I think an overall perhaps underrated player, and could add some depth there for Florida State if it needs it. Number 6 on our list is Liberty, and we'll talk about the Flames in depth as our team of the day, but Kaidon Salter is knocking on the door of a 100 player rating. He's in 99.5 right now. Incredibly productive season last year. A perfect fit for Jamie Chadwell's offense, that offense that we fell in love with when he was at Coastal Carolina. Grace McCall did so well. Of course, Chadwell going to Liberty. Salter, who did not start the season opener for the Flames, but did play in 14 games, threw for 2,876 yards, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, nearly 10 yards per pass attempt, and is at or very near the top of your CFF quarterback ranking. So for college fantasy football purposes, Salter is in an excellent position, as we'll talk about a little bit later as well, playing quite a weak schedule, which could certainly pay off for Salter numbers wise, may or may not pay off for Liberty as they make a run at a playoff spot. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. Number 7, Colorado and Shedeur Sanders. Colorado, had the offensive line issues last season. That limited Sanders, especially late in the year, actually forced him to miss the season finale for the Buffs. But of course, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, completely revamped that offensive line. Also, a lot of new faces elsewhere, and including at wide receiver, where LeJonte Wester comes in from FAU, where he had an incredible season last year, giving Sanders a trio of highly rated starting wide receivers in our projections, with Jimmy Horn Jr. and Travis Hunter, the two-way star. But Sanders himself, coming off a very good season, experienced 37 Division I starts, including double digits last year for the Buffs, which the depth, maybe there's certainly a drop off. We've got Destin Wade, the transfer from Kentucky, as our top backup to Sanders, but Walter Taylor III is in there, a Vandy transfer. Ryan Staub, who started that season finale, the redshirt freshman, in there as well. So Colorado is definitely, on paper, certainly better as a unit than it was when Sanders took over, but Shedeur Sanders being potential first-round pick, one of the players who dominates conversation in college football, understandably, and a very good player in his own right, is highly rated as well, upper 90s in our individual player ratings. Utah. Last year, quarterback was a real issue for the Utes. This season, it looks like a major strength, where Utah comes in at number 8 in our QB position strength ratings. A lot of that, of course, has to do with Cam Rising, back and fully healthy after a very strong spring, missed all of 2023, but a 25-game starter in his career, 95 rated player in his individual player rating. And then the Utes added Sam Heward, former 5-star Washington signee, spent last season at FCS Cal Poly, played, made 10 starts in his career so far, got a good bit of action there, pretty productive for Cal Poly. He joins a group that includes Brandon Rose, who missed a lot of last season due to injury, Isaac Wilson, pretty highly rated, I believe 4-star true freshman, and younger brother of NFL player, of course. And then, rounding it out, not the highest rated player, but Luke Batari did get a start in the bowl game for the Utes last season. So Utah pretty deep and has had to rely on a lot of quarterbacks recently. And so hopefully Rising be back and able to take every significant step this year if that's the intention for Utah. Number 9 on our overall QB unit rankings, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but a team that we talked about recently, Syracuse. And part of the major reason why Syracuse is a projected favorite in, I believe it's 9 games in our current projection. And some of those are, half a point at home against Virginia Tech, 2 points against Pitt, 3 points against BC, 3.5 against UNLV. So certainly, a lot of losable games on the schedule, but just as many, if not more, winnable games for the Orange. And Kyle McCord is a big piece of that. And he certainly was not, the most celebrated quarterback at Ohio State, but has made 13 career starts, has been productive. And I am going to be curious to see, are we just overrating Kyle McCord the way we calculate it as a highly rated player coming out of high school? 98, 60, 247 composite rating, 97 in his on-3 rating. He comes out to a 96 in our current, overall player rating. So adjusting those recruiting ratings for experience and then adding some production that he's put up the last couple of years at Ohio State, an upper 90s rated quarterback. And for most, you might say that maybe sounds a little too high, but we try not to mess with the numbers, try not to put our opinion in there. If he reaches certain benchmarks, has certain ratings from other experts in the past, we just sort of let it roll. One player who perhaps overcame a lower rating as a high school recruit, headlines are number 10 QB unit, and that is Memphis and Seth Hennigan, who is entering his 4th year as the starter for the Tigers, has 37 career starts under his belt, was just a 3-star coming out of high school, but coach's son, was like I said, an immediate starter for Memphis, and potentially, looking to take that Memphis team to the playoff. Memphis currently is our highest rated Group of 5 conference team. Memphis and Liberty are sort of jockeying back and forth for that. Boise State is certainly in the mix. I saw that Bill Connolly in his most recent SP Plus rankings write-up and other, maybe this was the 100 days that ESPN put out. Connolly wrote it. Memphis got his number 1 spot as G5 playoff contenders. We see it very similarly in our CFB Winning Edge power rankings. Memphis currently 38th overall in those numbers, number 1 in the AAC, number 1 among the Group of 5. And Hennigan is a huge part of that. He's been very productive, added 20 production points to his overall player rating thus far. So he is a 97.4 rated player coming in to this season. Now, those are position strength ratings, and like I said, they're definitely mostly connected to what is that starter's player rating, the way that we calculate it. However, I did want to take a little bit of a different view, switching it up with what are the quote unquote most talented QB units, and to usually when I throw the word out there, talented or raw talent, I'm thinking, those recruiting ratings coming out of high school. And for the most part, since we do, as I mentioned with Carson Beck, we do change those on 3 ratings a little more regularly. We do change those based on transfers and things like that. So, that doesn't necessarily give that raw quote unquote talent rating coming out of high school, but those 247 composite ratings do a little bit more. And we keep those mostly untouched. So we're just looking at average 247 rating here. And like I said, Texas with that top 3 and only 3 as far as scholarship quarterbacks go on the roster: Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, and Trey Owens. That average rating of 0.9685, of course, with Quinn Ewers 0.999 at the top of the list, and Arch Manning's 0.9995. It's as good as it gets. Also number 1 in average rivals rating, number 1 in average on 3 rating, number 1 in average player rating, VGR, our video game ratings from CFB Winning Edge. So if you're just talking who has the most raw talent on, in that quarterback room on average, Texas gets the nod there. Alabama comes in at number 2. Alabama this year only number 10 in our power rankings, number 5 in our SEC power rankings. Seems too low to me, uncomfortably low. But when you just look at these, talent ratings, average 247 composite ratings, position by position, Alabama's going to be at or near the top in probably more positions than not, and we'll discuss that a little bit more as we go, into those other groups. But number 2 in average 247 composite ranking, that includes Jalen Milroe with his 0.9635 coming out of high school. Ty Simpson, the highest rated player, at 0.9883. He is the projected backup. But then, of course, Dylan Longren and Austin Mack, the most recent transfer from Washington, followed Kalen DeBoer, are both in the 92, 93 and a half range in those 247 composite ratings as well. So very, very talented, of course. Number 3 is a QB unit that, some point to as Ohio State's perhaps biggest question mark in its potential national championship run. Ohio State is our number 1 team in our overall power rankings, and Will Howard and Devin Brown aren't super high in our VGR ratings. They're 87, 86, right around there. But if you just look at average 247 sports ratings, it's incredibly impressive, and that includes Will Howard, who was a bit under the radar as a 0.8586 coming out of high school. If we only took Devin Brown, Lincoln Kienholz, and then the 2 true freshmen, Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin, in the mix, that average would be a 0.9696, which, looking at that, how does that compare? It would be very, very close to Texas. So Ohio State would be right there at number 2, very, very close to number 1 as far as average talent in that room. Number 4 is Georgia. We ran down that group a little bit earlier. Carson Beck being the lowest rated among that quartet. Number 5 is Florida State, who we mentioned before. Number 6 is Oregon. So again, Dillon Gabriel, a little bit under the radar as a high school recruit, but has been incredibly productive in 5 years as a quarterback at the FBS level. Number 7, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but Kentucky, which added a lot is as far as their average talent ratings through the transfer portal. Brock Vandegrift, of course, was a 99 in the 247 composite. They did also get Bo Allen back through the transfer portal, who he's been on a little bit of a journey, making his way back to Kentucky. True freshman Connor Boley in that mix. He is a 90 plus rated player. And then also Gavin Wimsatt, the transfer from Rutgers, is a late addition to that group as well. And he was a highly rated player coming out of high school, 4-star early enrollee, kind of reclassified late, if memory serves. Number 8 is Penn State, headlined by Drew Allar. Number 9, Syracuse, of course, and Kyle McCord. And number 10, Louisville, which Tyler Shuck being the projected starter this season. Pierce Clarkson is right now our number 2 on the list based on spring reports. But a lot of talent, even though there are some, perhaps players who haven't quite lived up to that high school rating. Harrison Bailey, Brady Allen in that group. Highly thought of true freshman Deuce Adams joining the mix as well. But Louisville, pretty talented group on the whole. Next up, let's talk low ratings or teams that have some depth concerns. So this is something that I want to dig in a little bit more, especially with other position groups. But I think for quarterback, it makes sense. And most teams we've talked about here, even if you're a Texas and you lose Ewers and have Arch Manning, even if you're Georgia and you lose Carson Beck and you have multiple 4 fringe 5-star former recruits ready to step up, that's going to be a concern. Any team that's got a top 10 QB unit, that starter goes down. Most teams are going to see a bit of a drop off. A few probably will be able to weather it, and Texas has been challenged with that in years past. So certainly feel like they're in a pretty good position. But Liberty, for example, if Salter goes down, there's going to be a big drop off, at least in terms of the way we calculate that player rating. Still reason to be confident, especially against that schedule, that Jamie Chadwell and his coaching staff are going to be able to put that offense in a position to score a lot of points, but probably not, going to be quite at that same level with somebody like Salter running the show. But there are a few other teams that stick out to me on the very low end of our position strength ratings, and perhaps the lowest on the list. They're 131st out of 134 currently ranked there. But Northern Illinois, we talked about the Huskies in our MAC preview, of course. And I think if Northern Illinois had a higher rated quarterback, I said this on the show last night, that it might be our MAC favorite. Currently, Northern Illinois is 89th in our power rankings, 4th in the MAC. I think they absolutely are a contender to get back to the MAC championship game after a couple of years away. A lot of that has to do with talent elsewhere. Running back Ontario Brown, wide receiver Trayvon Rudolph, Grayson Barnes, the big 6'5" wide receiver tight end kind of hybrid. A decent offensive line that's got a lot of experience. A fully returning secondary. All 5 starters are back in the secondary. But if you look at the quarterback, and this isn't to disparage Ethan Hampton or Jalen Macon, who it seemed like are the top 2 contenders there, but the way we calculate it, they're just not highly rated players. Hampton is mid 70s, does have some experience, started 4 games, hasn't put up big numbers in any of those to add any production there. Jalen Macon was a part-time starter at the FCS level at Arkansas Pine Bluff, but in my limited viewing, looks like has a pretty high ceiling, listed at 6'5", 230, very athletic. But neither of those players is as of right now, and the way that we calculate it, somebody who is going to elevate this Northern Illinois offense. Hopefully it'll work out that way if you're an NIU fan and hoping for them to get back into MAC championship contention. But right now, as far as this list goes, as far as conference title contenders, I think NIU is the biggest case for maybe being a QB away. Some others that rank pretty low here. Cincinnati is 123 in our position strength ratings. And I know there are some folks, including, on the CFF team at Campus to Canton. I believe Chris Moxley specifically is a pretty big fan of Brendan Sorsby. Might not be the only one. But again, the way we calculate it, through his 7 games started in his career, he was at Indiana, transferred to Cincinnati. He's right. He's basically Ethan Hampton at NIU. 74, almost 75 in our player rating. Brady Lichtenberg is considered our top backup. Brady Drogush, if you missed it, has converted to linebacker. We do still have him listed on the QB depth chart in that top 4, but I believe he is going to be focusing almost exclusively at linebacker this year. He actually happens to be the highest rated QB recruit as far as those 247 composite ratings go. So Cincinnati, if we're looking for a bounce back season after a disappointing Big 12 debut, Brandon Sorsby is going to have to play higher, at a higher level than his rating would indicate. And certainly he's capable of that. And if he does add some production points to the mix, he will continue to move up, and Cincinnati will move up from this current 123 unit rating. But right now, Cincinnati, maybe I believe that is the lowest Power 4 conference QB unit in the way we calculate it. Number 122 is Washington State. We talked a lot about Washington State this spring and do have high hopes for if it's John Mateer, who's the starter, he'll be productive based on the track record of that offense. The play caller there, Ben Arbuckle. But Mateer is, really lowly rated coming out of high school, just hasn't had the experience, the chance to add some production there. Ohio is a team that I'm a little bit concerned about. They're 116 in our QB unit rankings. Parker Navarro, likely starter there, taking over a 10-win team that just completely decimated by transfers. So I see a significant drop-off. They're right around 6.5 in our win total projections. I think it'll probably be considered a success if Ohio gets back to a bowl game, just based on the turnover they've got there. San Jose State is 115, also coming off a bowl game, also a lot of turnover. Ken Niumatalolo as the new head coach and implementing kind of a run and shoot-ish offense with Craig Stutzman taking over as the play caller. Coach Ken Niumatalolo has been quoted since getting the job, since being reported that he was the top candidate, saying he wants to throw the football and throw it a lot. Not going to be that Navy triple option. I've said that plenty already, but want to remind folks, or if you're joining us for the first time, even though Ken Niumatalolo is head coach at San Jose State, this is going to be a pass-heavy offense. And right now, quarterback looks like a little bit of a question mark, especially with their highest-rated player, Jay Butterfield, being former 4-star Oregon signee, just sort of falling down that depth chart. It sounded like this spring into the 3rd or 4th spot as things stood as we get to the end of the year. Number 112, Wyoming. Often in the past, Wyoming has been able to succeed even without the highest rated quarterback. They do have Evan Svoboda expected to be the starter stepping in. But just again, the way we calculate it, not super high. Georgia Southern, another prolific passing offense with a little bit of a question who's going to take over at quarterback. They're 111. Toledo is our highest rated MAC team in our power rankings, but Tucker Gleason likely starter there, but Toledo, that QB unit as a whole, ranks 110. The biggest reason I'm a little lower on Toledo than a team like maybe Bowling Green, who I think personally might be the team to beat in the MAC, with Miami of Ohio, of course, the defending champs, who we'll talk about in a second. Among them, I think it's a clear top 4, those 3 in Northern Illinois in the MAC this season. Pitt is our second highest or second lowest Power 4 quarterback unit. And Nate Yarnell, I know we've read quotes this spring about Pat Narduzzi and the new offensive coordinator there, who are very high on Yarnell, who got some experience at the end of last year, beat out some players who rated much higher than he did by the end of last season. But Pitt right now comes in at 109 in our position and unit ratings, a big reason why the Panthers are as low as they are in our ACC power rankings. If they were able to have more of an FBS average quarterback unit, that Pitt team probably would be more middle of the pack in the ACC. But right now, our numbers see a major area of concern at the quarterback position for Pitt. Some really successful G5 teams coming at 107 and 106. UTSA and Troy seeing some turnover after long-time starting quarterbacks move on. Didn't really hit the transfer portal for a super experienced starter. So how will that shake out? How will that impact the success of those teams moving forward? And then a few other power conference programs who are in the mid-90s that I think, there's certainly some potential at places like Cal, which is 97th right now. We do have Fernando Mendoza, who was the starter last year, projected there, even though Chandler Rogers, most recently at North Texas, higher rated player, has more experience. If he were to win that job, Cal would move up just a little bit. We'll see how that shakes out. Number 96 is South Carolina, where Lenore Sellers may be one of the most exciting first-year starters that we will see in college football this year. He just happens to be fairly low rated the way that we calculate it as a redshirt freshman. But Sellers, I would think very quickly is going to start racking up some production and climbing up the list there. Arizona State is at number 95, though there's certainly some hope that Sam Leavitt, right, is the expected starter there, transfer from Michigan State. Also, Jeff Sims showed up recently or committed to the Sun Devils, so there's a little bit of depth there as well. But four players who took quarterback snaps or attempted passes, but three quarterbacks who played last season have transferred out. Trenton Bordeaux is the most experienced player there. He's a former walk-on or unrated player, but that unit ranks pretty low in our ratings. And then finishing up with this group, Michigan, number 93. Do I expect Michigan to have poor quarterback play? No. But again, the way that we calculate it, talent rating coming out of high school, experience and production, Michigan's group, right now we've got Alex Orji as the projected starter. He was an underrated player coming out of high school, especially if you compare that to a lot of the buzz that we got coming out of Rose Bowl practices and Bruce Feldman's freaks list last year. Alex Orji is a 79 rated player. He kind of like Lenore Sellers, if he gets an opportunity to start and really starts to find a rhythm, that number is going to increase quite quickly. Jack Tuttle, the most experienced, oldest player in the room, a little bit higher rated in our player ratings, but he, not a slam dunk to be even number two. Might end up as the starter. We're unclear, but Jaden Denegal is in the mix. Davis Warren, true freshman Jaden Davis, who is the highest rated of this group as a true freshman. Highest rated, I should say, in that 247 composite rating. Interesting to see how it all shakes out, but the average and the weighted average that we use as our position strength ratings, Michigan is currently 93rd in those calculations. Three teams that have depth concerns that caught my eye that also have had quarterbacks deal with a lot of injuries recently. Kansas is 15th in our QB ratings, and that's in large part because Jalen Daniels has been so good when available, but there is a significant drop-off there if Daniels were to go down this year. Jason Bean is gone, who was one of the best backup options in college football, played a ton, and pretty unique skill set for the Jayhawks, and they didn't miss much of a beat even without Daniels. If Daniels is not fully healthy or goes down at some point this year, just looking at the average two-deep rankings, Kansas would drop from 15th to 56. So if we look at those position strength ratings, which heavily weight the starter, Kansas top 15 QB unit. Look at just the two deep, the average of the top two. Kansas falls to 56, so FBS average basically. So that would be a significant drop off this year. Texas Tech, where Morton, was shut down midway through spring practice. Most of what we're hearing is he's going to be back this fall, and certainly hope that is the case. But Texas Tech, 59th in our standard position strength rankings, but the 2-deep average, 69th. So if Morton goes down, again, there's going to be a drop-off there, inexperienced player. And then another of note, and it didn't work, it didn't seem to matter last year because Brett Gabbert did go down. Had a really gruesome looking injury mid-season at Miami University, Miami of Ohio. And Avion Smith was there to step up and lead the Redhawks to the MAC championship. Smith is gone, transferred to the FCS level. So now that drop off is even bigger. So Gabbert, hearing good things. Hopefully he's back and 100% this fall. Miami do absolutely think is going to be in the mix with a chance to repeat as MAC champs. But if Gabbert were to, not be fully healthy or endure some sort of additional injury, then probably not in as good a situation. Will be much, much tougher to hit those expectations this season. All right, so a lot of QB unit rating talk. We'll talk running backs next time, and it'll probably be a little, I don't know, maybe more interesting. We'll see. But I wanted to focus on one of those units, one of those QB units that does rank so high with Liberty this season, and already ran down Salter's passing production. He was also a 1,000-yard rusher. Did that in 14 games, of course, but 1,089 yards and 12 touchdowns on just 163 carries. And like I said, wasn't the week one starter there at Liberty, but a perfect fit for Jamie Chadwell's offense, as I mentioned. Quentin Cooley, of course, also a perfect fit. Got maybe a heavier workload than we expected, but really took advantage. 221 attempts for 1,401 yards and 16 touchdowns. Both Cooley and Salter averaged over 6 yards per carry, 6.3 for Cooley, 6.7 for Salter. Billy Lucas stepped up and ended up becoming that number 2 running back. He ran for nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, but it's a deep group. James Joyner Jr. had 2 scores, 250 yards. Von Blue ended up going down with an injury early on last fall. He was really starting to make some buzz as a true freshman, ends up with 116 yards on 19 carries, 6.1 yards per attempt. Expect that those numbers will go up. Blue probably going to challenge Joyner and or Lucas on the depth chart this year. But just about, that entire running back room is back for Liberty. So that's going to be key. Liberty is losing a player who was technically a wide receiver, listed as a wide receiver, but Aaron Bedgood had 58 carries. So kind of a dual role player there, averaged 9.5 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 552 yards. Also, did some good things as a receiver as well. 21 catches, 29 targets, 220 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is gone, as is Elijah Smoot, as is Noah Frith, who ranked 4th and 3rd, respectively, in receiving yardage. But the big one, number 1 player on that receiving leaderboard for Liberty in every category by a wide range, CJ Daniels, who was transferred to LSU, fighting for a starting spot for the Tigers. But based on what we saw last year at Liberty, absolutely has the talent to do it. So with those, 4 of those top 5 receivers gone, that leaves Treon Sibley as the most productive returner. He was targeted 33 times for 23 catches, 467 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Tight end Bentley Henshaw is the leading returner with 6 touchdown catches. A third of his receptions went for touchdowns last season. He had 219 yards on those 18 catches. A couple of intriguing transfers coming in. Julian Gray, Tyson Mobley with that connection to Coastal Carolina in the past. But there's a couple of players who are returning from injury who are just as big, if not even bigger additions. Reese Smith, I think, being the key there. Reese Smith went down early last season, before the season even kicked off. Missed all of last year. Transfer from West Virginia. Seems like yet another of those kind of perfect fits in that Liberty offense. Elijah Canyon also ended up at Liberty this year, formerly of Auburn and Purdue. There've been some real high hopes for Canyon in the past, certainly from a CFF perspective. Hasn't quite worked out, has dealt with a lot of injuries, but perhaps he'll be able to capture that potential a little bit for Liberty this year moving forward. But as I mentioned, Dante Lee Jr., a transfer from Shaw, Mobley from Coastal Carolina, and then Gray was played a lot at NC State. Expect that he will likely be a starter for the Flames this year. Offensive line, from just an overall returning production standpoint, looks like maybe the biggest concern offensively for Liberty. Starting center Jordan White, right tackle Xavier Gray are back. They added an experienced player in John Paul Flores, formerly FCS transfer, but most recently at Louisville. He played over 10% of snaps last season for the Cards. And then defensively, Liberty, as far as just quote unquote returning starters, and the way we calculate that is, 51% or more games started, took that first snap last season. They get 3 of their 4 starters back on the defensive line, half their starting linebacker group in that 4-2-5 base, and then 2 starters, 1 corner, 1 safety, Marion Williams and Quentin Reese being those 2 respectively. But add 2 experienced players through the transfer portal that we expect to start in linebacker Taylor Jackson and defensive back Dominic Hill, plus added some other depth at all 3 levels of the defense as well. So Liberty is a team that, usually when we talk about average, talent ratings, they're not going to rank particularly high. If we just look position by position, that average 247 rating. And this does include transfers like Salter, who started his career at Tennessee as a high 4-star guy. The quarterback position, Salter and this Liberty group, top 10, top 5 quarterback unit, top 6, I should say, number 6 in their position strength. They're 54th in that average 247 sports rating in that position group. Running back, which we said how deep it was and how experienced, 101st in those average 247 ratings at that position. 88th at wide receiver, 85th at tight end, 98th on the offensive line. Nevertheless, this is a team that certainly, has been productive enough that they've been able to add to those talent ratings. They're currently 47th in our offensive roster strength, 84th on the defensive side of the ball, but played like a top 10 offense last season. 11th in overall offensive team performance, 6th passing because they were so efficient. Didn't need it quite as much, but opportunities were certainly there to hit big plays for Salter when the teams tried to load up on the run, which was a top 20 team performance rushing attack last season. A little bit better than average FBS defense, 54th in overall team performance on that side of the ball, 30th against the pass, 73rd against the run. And then I touched on it briefly, but Liberty is playing maybe the weakest schedule of any FBS team this year. So, last year rolled through the regular season undefeated, got by New Mexico State in the CUSA championship game. If we're looking, post-game win expectancy numbers, they had an average in that regular season and that conference championship game of a 98%, according to College Football Data's post-game win expectancy numbers. But then most of us probably saw and remember getting blown out in the Fiesta Bowl by Oregon, 45-6. So this year, Liberty is probably a pretty good bet to be in a very similar position, playing a schedule that ranks 133rd in our current strength of schedule rankings, which is the average team strength rating of its opponents. Week 1, they get FCS Campbell. Week 2, a road game at New Mexico State, which, yes, went to the Conference USA Championship game last year, but is another team that just lost a ton of transfers and is not going to be near the same team. Coaching change as well, probably a factor there. Then return home to host UTEP. So that's two CUSA conference games in the first 3 weeks before turning his attention to the non-conference, which, East Carolina I expect to be much improved, but still a team that was double-digit losses last season. App State on the road, that's going to be a pretty tough one. App State is definitely a Sun Belt title contender. Some might say the favorite. Believe they actually are our highest rated Sun Belt team right now. They're 66th in our overall power rankings, number one in the Sun Belt in our most up-to-date team strength ratings. So that's going to be a tough matchup, especially in Boone. Nevertheless, that might be the toughest game and certainly a winnable one for Liberty. Right now, we've got Liberty as about a 3.5 point favorite in that contest. Do get a week off before the Tuesday game against FIU, and then another week off before back-to-back Wednesdays, where they will go to Kennesaw State and then host Jacksonville State in the month of November. They do have 3 road games, so that could potentially add a little bit of a layer of intrigue. But at Middle Tennessee, at UMass, home against Western Kentucky, maybe they're top competition in Conference USA this season, and then at Sam Houston. So we've got Liberty as basically a double-digit favorite in 10 games. So they are favored in every game, with that 3.27 at App State being the closest call, and certainly a losable game for Liberty. But getting back to the Conference USA Championship game is certainly the expectation. Undefeated regular season, absolutely in the realm of possibility, maybe even the most likely result, if not 12-1. But is that schedule, which includes 0 power for opponents for the second straight season, and what happened last season shouldn't, in most cases, factor into what happens this year, or that the playoff committee's discussions. But losing 45-6 against Oregon last season is probably going to be tough for those committee members to forget. So, will a Memphis or a Boise State, who's 12-1, maybe get the nod over a 13-0 Liberty? That'll certainly be a talking point should it come to that next season. But Liberty, especially with Kaidon Salter, I expect to be a very fun offense this season. Overwhelming favorite in Conference USA, and one of our highest rated G5 teams, certainly, and Kaidon Salter's high rating has a lot to do with that. So that is going to do it for us today. We will be back on Friday. Probably dig into, I think we might look sort of through a CFF lens at that MAC conference preview a little bit, and then we'll talk running back unit ratings as well. So hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Thank you for giving this video a like. Thank you for reviewing and rating your favorite C2C podcast in that Campus to Canton podcast feed. And then, of course, our biggest thank you to those of you who are members at campustocanton.com, where you can join for as little as $2.99 per month or take advantage of everything we've got to offer at the All 22 and C2C Winning Edge levels. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen. This has been episode 47 of Good Morning College Football. We'll see you Friday. Until then, take care.